Hello, I'm Dick Corsell, and welcome to Community Care Network Connections. Community Care Network is the parent organization of Rutland Mental Health Services and Rutland Community Programs. And today we're going to be talking about our Developmental Services Division, the Community Access Program, and specifically Autism Awareness with a special event that will be held in June at the Paramount Theater. So joining me today are our guest, Jessalyn Gustin. Jessalyn is the Director of the Community Support Team at the Community Access Program at Rutland Mental Health Services. Welcome, Jessalyn.
Thank you.
Jean Bradley is the Support Specialist at the Community Access Program for Rutland Mental Health Services as well. And welcome, Jean.
Thank you for having me.
And we welcome a special guest, Bruce Bouchard, who's the Executive Director of the Paramount Theater here in Rutland. And welcome, Bruce. And we'll be talking about how the Paramount is supporting this effort in autism awareness. I'm going to start with Jessalyn first because we want to talk a little bit about the Community Access Program of Rutland Mental Health Services. Now, you've been on the program before, and CAP has been featured on the program, but I think it's important for viewers to have a better understanding of the range of services that CAP provides. So it's an opportunity to pitch a little bit about the type of work that CAP does.
So we're a nonprofit organization. As you stated, we serve individuals with developmental disabilities in Rutland County and their families. We support their families across the lifespan. We have an array of services from service coordination for children and families, residential options. It could be 24-hour care in their own apartments or a shared living model. We also have in-home supports for people that are still living with their families but need a little bit of support. We have our supported employment program that I've been on to talk about before, and our community-based supports that support people in the community learning life skills and making connections with their community that are meaningful. We also have nursing consultation for people around medical issues and linking them up with resources in the community, training for staff and for other individuals, and crisis support, which is kind of an evolving thing, but being able to really meet people's needs when they're in need.
So CAP is a relatively large part of Rutland Mental Health Services.
Yes, it is.
How many people does CAP work with in a given year in all of the programs?
The individuals that we serve directly are over 400 people in the county, but it expands well beyond that, like I said, with families and you know, the other community partners that we work with, but directly 400 people, over 400.
And in previous shows, and early on when we were doing these programs with Gloria Quinn, who is the Vice President of Developmental Services or Rutland Mental Health Services, we talked a lot about how things have changed in terms of programming for people with developmental disabilities. Back from the early to mid-1990s when the Brandon Training School closed and services became more community-based.
Right.
So I think it's important for people to have an understanding of that. And today we're going to be talking about autism. And that may not be something that people necessarily are associating perhaps with developmental disabilities or CAP or what have you. And this is an opportunity to talk about this because there's a lot of work that's being done in this agency with autism. So I'm going to have you, Jessalyn, and then we're going to talk with Jean and Bruce, talk about what's coming up at the Paramount Theater. What is it that CAP is doing along with Bruce and the Paramount to raise awareness of the issue of autism?
Okay, so on June 15th at the Paramount Theater, we're going to have a screening of the film Wretches and Jabberers, which is a documentary film about two gentlemen with autism in Vermont. They traveled the world kind of raising awareness about the abilities of people sometimes perceived as having limitations in their ability to interact with other people and be contributing members of their community. So we're going to have a screening of the film, and then afterwards we'll be joined with the gentleman and the two individuals that have been instrumental in helping them really kind of get the word out. And yeah, so it should be a really interesting night, and I'm going to let Jeannie kind of talk some more too about some of the specifics that we've pulled together, because it's a dynamic evening full of lots of players. We've got lots of community, other organizations that want to get the word out about what they do as well.
So it's going to be a really unique community event. Not only are we going to show Wretches and Jabberers, we're going to have the talent from the film join for a question and answer session following the film and open up to the audience that may have questions about developmental disabilities and autism, and raise awareness about how we can support people at the best level possible. and allowing people to live a very great quality of life. So we are partnering with Downright Special. They have donated an iPad for the event. Quite often with autism, you see people with communication gaps, and that is also the same for a variety of people, of populations with Down syndrome, as well as people suffering from ALS and possibly, people having cerebral palsy. These people have communication gaps. We want to show through partnering with Downright Special that there are a variety of people using communication supports to be able to communicate. We have a great community here. McDonald's has come forward and has offered their sponsorship, as well as the Rutland Hospital, and a lot of various organizations, and we look forward to this very exciting event. I have a personal connection to this film. I have a son with nonverbal autism that actually communicates through a variety of supports. He uses .2 boards, voice approximations, pointing, an iPad with one-shot messaging, supportive typing, a variety of different tools in his toolbox to be able to access to communicate at his best. I try to surround him with different examples of other people using communication supports and living a great quality of life. And this film really impacted me in that way, to show that all people communicate. It's not just speakers.
I think it's important. Why don't you show the little poster that you brought of the
so you'll
film.
Yeah, we'll see this around town. These are the two gentlemen from the film, Tracy Thrasher and Larry Bissonette. We are lucky to have them join us following the film to answer questions from the audience. These guys are hilarious. They are individuals that are changing lives for hundreds of people throughout the world, including my son, and giving us hope that there are options for people that communicate differently.
That's great. Now, I want to now ask Bruce how the Paramount got involved in this. I mean, the Rutland community is so fortunate to have such a gem, the Paramount Theater, that has brought so much wonderful theater, live performances to this community. And you've done a lot of support with community groups. How did you guys get involved in this particular effort, and what does this mean for the Paramount?
Well, these two wonderful ladies brought the project to me. I was aware of the film about a year ago for the first time. And what first attracted me to it was the title. It's a stunning, audacious title. If you think of Wretches and Jabberers, that really, it's a brilliant title because it really calls to mind the misconceptions that people have about other than and people with challenges. I just want to throw in on a personal level, I had an acting career for 10 years, and I was lucky enough to be able to play three different versions of people with these kinds of challenges. And I became very attracted to these folks who gave me something in my life that I would never have had before if I hadn't stepped into their world and volunteered and participated and learned what it was about. So that was number one. So when they brought me Wretches and Jabberers, I said, well, yes, of course, I know of that film. I have not seen it. I've seen extensive clips from it. But you could tell it's a first-class documentary. And I know Dan Quinn, and I know the organization, and have great respect for it. And this one over here is this is a hard charger. I mean, she should be, she should be on an NFL coaching squad. She has it going on. And so when we first met, and it's a yesable proposition. It's really important for the Paramount to, number one, we put in film technology in 2009. It was a singular focus of mine to revive movies in the hall because for 44 years, that's the only thing that happened there. And it seemed to me to be a great way to make it a theater for everybody. Yeah. So, and this project lined up perfectly with one of the important things about the mission of the theater, because we do seek to be a theater that exists for everybody and a theater that speaks not just to our bottom line financially, but to our bottom line educationally, compassionately, from a point of view of understanding that which we do not understand and are possibly threatened or upset or alienated by. And bottom line, that's what this film is doing. It's saying, take a look, have compassion, wonder, find out. I don't know if it came across. These gentlemen communicate, Larry and Tracy, communicate on speaking touchpads. They're essentially typewriters, and that's the way that we can get into their mind. And before this technology was available, perhaps we wondered what mind was there, and that there was no way to find out. And so, I don't mean to go on so long. This was a project that is near and dear to my heart, and these wonderful ladies, and it just took on a life of its own.
I'm going to ask Gene, that title, which I agree with Bruce. What a wonderful title, Wretches and Jabberers.
Audacious title.
It is an audacious title, and I did a little bit of research as well on the film and found that when they're using the term Wretches and Jabberers, wretches are people that are struggling sometimes to communicate, and they're the jabbers are all the rest of us that can't shut up. So I think that's just a wonderful, wonderful title. I want to now talk with you, Gene, specifically about autism. Now, we're hearing so much about autism as of late. It seems like the autism and autism spectrum is something that we're reading about more. We're hearing about it.
Right.
It's something that people frequently hear, but perhaps are not aware of. What is meant when we say that someone has autism, or what is the autism spectrum?
Well, autism has been defined by experts as a developmental disorder affecting social and communication skills, as well as verbal and nonverbal communication. And the CDC estimates that 1 in 88 children have been identified with ASD, or autism spectrum disorder. But I think the importance of the film is that it highlights the issue of autism, but more specifically recognizes people who communicate differently. I often refer to a study by the group Ann Donnellan, David Hill, and Martha Leary, Rethinking Autism, Implications of Sensory and Motor Differences. And what they came up with is that they recognized here that sensory and movement differences may play a significant part in the lives of those who live with autism. Sensory and movement differences may include difficulties in starting, stopping, continuing, combining, and switching motor action, speech, thought, memory, and emotion. And understanding these factors may offer guidance in rethinking assumptions about autism characteristics, social interaction, communication, and other supports. One good example is Temple Grandin. Temple is an American doctor of animal science and a professor at the Colorado State University. She's a best-selling author and consultant to the livestock industry on animal behavior. And as a person with autism herself, Dr. Grandin is also noted for her work in autism advocacy and is the inventor of the squeeze machine designed to calm hypersensitive people. So she talks about people labeled with autism often move their bodies in ways that are unfamiliar to us. Some people rock, repetitively touch an object, jump, and finger posture, where other people come to a standstill in a doorway, sit until cued to move, or turn away when someone beckons. As professionals trained to see these as autistic behaviors, most of us have interpreted such movements as both volitional and meaningless, or as communicative acts signaling avoidance of interaction and evidence of diminished cognitive capacity, or as some combination of these, and often have targeted them for reduction. People have made their own theories of autism. So I feel like what the movie does is move us away from these myths about autism and about disability and move us further to an understanding that we need to presume competence and welcome one another as very diverse members, that we all have commonalities, we all have personal goals, aspirations, and dreams.
Good. Now, Jessalyn, I want to ask you, why is this event for CAP at the Paramount Theater important for the community and for autism awareness in general? What is it about this that makes this really important for people to be engaged with?
Well, I think we've been talking about the importance of understanding and kind of taking the mystery away and the unknowing and filling up people's understanding about this idea that we all are contributing members and we all have a desire internally to connect with each other, and having a disability doesn't change that for people. So it's really, I think the importance for the community and the people that we support is that it levels the playing field. It brings people together. It shows that, hey, here's a night where we can all come together and learn about each other and enjoy time together, and we're going to walk away feeling like we know one another better. So I think it's raising the awareness within the community to be able to bridge the gap, you know, that may be present for some people now. So.
Well, let me ask you, how will this event, do you think, impact the people that you work with? I mean, this is something obviously that is increasing awareness, but you're also hoping that this is going to be a resource for people and people that you work with. How do you see that working? How do you see that as being a resource?
Well, the money that will be raised from the evening will be used to help individuals access, you know, speech and language resources, adaptive communication devices, really trying to increase that opportunity. And I think with their support network, seeing this, people will feel more inclined. We've already seen since we brought this movie to the agency that there has been a spike in people saying, hey, we want to have, you know, people get in touch with Pascal or different resources within the community that can help people express themselves through either typing or different ways. So I think directly we'll be helping people with those efforts, but I think on a bigger scale we're going to be helping people with being part of a community that understands better and has more knowledge.
You know, I want to ask you, you talked previously about issues of communication with
Yes.
autism.
Correct.
Could you talk a little bit more about those challenges and what you had mentioned some of the techniques that are currently used, but what is being done now to help people that have autism be able to emerge from that shell, as Bruce had said earlier, that perhaps we wondered really what was going on, and now there is that opportunity. You could talk a little bit about what we've seen as changes in the past few years.
Right. Well, like you have noted that there existed supports back in, you know, years ago where the people with disabilities had only access or options of institutionalization. Luckily, we've moved away from those kinds of models and embraced a more inclusive model. And I could say a few examples with my son. Being a person on the autism spectrum, God only knows, born years ago, what his options would be. I feel now that embracing this inclusive model allows people to live a better quality of life. And I know in my son's case, with him being with his typical classmates, it's changing the whole culture of his class. They're becoming more tolerant, more patient, more kind. They have more empathy towards each other and towards Jacob. It's better for our community to have everybody being able to be invited and included in meaningful ways.
I'm going to now ask Bruce, because you talked before, both as your role as an actor and gaining empathy and understanding, having played roles, people with developmental disabilities, but what are you looking forward to on this evening at the Paramount? Now, this is going to be on June 15th. This is at 6:30 p.m. at the Paramount Theater. It's the film Wretches and Jabberers. But I know the Paramount has done so much in this community with programming and you know, bringing in children and families who may not have experienced the live performing arts before. But what are you looking forward to in an evening like this with something like Wretches and Jabberers?
Well, I'm looking forward to meeting these two men. I sort of feel like I already know them. I love documentary film. I hope over time that we can build an audience for it. Some of the great films of all time, I think they are small audience films. I don't think this one will be. This is a powerful organization with a lot going on to put people to the theater. I see it as a specialty fellowship event where not only can we have a good time, but if you buy the notion that what's wrong with the world is lack of consideration, plain and simple, gosh, how great is it for us to learn a new kind of consideration? And by that I mean consider this abled rather than disabled. Consider this abled person. What are they able to do, say, and feel? And how am I transformed if I know that?
Exactly.
And maybe, the world is suffering. And when the world is suffering, people become more filled with more fear and isolation. And it manifests in terms of how we dismiss people and assume people to be a certain way that makes us feel uncomfortable. What I hope is that this film breaks through that a little bit and gets people to wonder about these otherly abled folks and what they're about.
I like what you said, and I like what Larry said, Larry Bissonette in the film. He said, look beyond my autism to my true personality.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is an important key, because if a person cannot speak, we can't assume they have little to say. They're always communicating. It's the least dangerous assumption to see all as full human beings who may have formidable and unfamiliar challenges to overcome, and who, of course, desire social interaction. But it's understanding people's experiences that lead to acceptance, accommodation, love, support, tolerance, diversity.
So this evening, as I'm hearing it described by Bruce, again, this is going to be on June 15th at 6:30 p.m. at the Paramount Theater, is much more than going and watching a great film, the great film series that the Paramount puts on with these wonderful, wonderful films which have become iconic symbols of America. This is much more than that. I mean, this is really something to engage the community on an issue that's very important, and to help, as Bruce had said, sort of create some healing and understanding. I do want to ask Jessalyn, because we started out by talking about how the term autism just seems to be more prevalent today, and we're hearing it more. Has there been a spike in the diagnoses of autism in children that are presenting with the spectrum, or why are we hearing so much about it now?
Well, there's lots of speculation, so nobody really knows. There's lots of ideas about what is happening or what's going on, but I think I think it's awareness. I think people are spending the time recognizing and wanting to help, and really, I think the biggest thing with it is diagnosis and assessments of people. I think it's also some of this deinstitutionalization that we've talked about, where now it's kind of in the forefront. We have people in our communities, and we do want to help, and we want to have a better understanding of how do we help you.
And we've also noticed that the early intervention that a lot of these folks have the ability to access was very, very beneficial in our case to Jacob's outcome. So I think those supports early on, and continue to support these folks as they age up, makes a world of difference.
So there's obviously more awareness, and when you think about how in the community access program, Rutland Mental Health Services certainly, and the services they offer, but when you consider how even as a society we've transformed from not too long ago, when people who were different or with developmental disabilities were placed in institutions and put away from the community.
Yes.
And now services are community-based, and they're meant to be all-encompassing, engaging, and welcoming. And that's why I think that, from what I'm hearing, this event at the Paramount on June 15th is going to be very important because it really does put that human face on it.
I have a friend, his name is Richard Atfield, and he's from the UK. He had some severe challenges as it related to communication gaps. His body would not cooperate, so he had problems demonstrating his knowledge, and we actually Facebooked each other last night, and one of the things he said is, Jean, I put the work in, Jean, thousands and thousands of hours typing because I needed to be able to express myself. I was 15 before I typed to communicate because my verbal language never came. That is an awful lot of language and social skills to have to make up. But if you have no means of expression or limited means of expression, it does not mean that the language or the ability is not there, only that the opportunities have not arisen. A child needs encouragement to communicate, not being penalized for the inability to express itself verbally. And he finishes with, I found it helpful to look at from the other person's perspective. It helps to bring it into balance. You cannot change society's perceptions, only continue with the typing in the hope that one day people recognize the fact that you are a person just like them. I know that I cope far better in mainstream than I ever did in special education. He was from the old school, seclusion. Because if you have a whole class of children with poor language skills, you have no peer group to learn from. Worse still, you feel so frustrated at the fact. And I wanted to finish with a poem that he wrote, but I think that it would be nice if you read it. And it's called Diversity, and I think it ties it all together. Would you do that, Bruce?
I'll read it cold. Oh, we're having an audition. What is in a name? Does it define who I am? Is it my heritage or my roots? No, I am unique, not an umbrella term. I turn the page and I move on. What is in a name? Does it tell you who you are? Or is it like a label fixed onto a can or jar? Does the thought make you weep late at night as you try to sleep? A label fixed on a can? Does it make you feel understood? Or does it tear you apart and break your heart until you want to cry out, I am a person too. I am just like you. I am me, and I am free to be all I can like any man. We are unique in a world that sleeps. I turn the page and I move on.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
So we are talking about an important event, the film Wretches and Jabberers, June 15th at 6:30 p.m. at the Paramount Theater in downtown Rutland. This is a film that is important for the community to have a better understanding of autism, and these two gentlemen that are the stars of this documentary will also be there in attendance, and this is a fundraiser for the Community Access Program at Rutland Mental Health Services, which will also help provide services to those people in need. So I thank you all, Jessalyn Gustin from CAP and Jean Bradley from CAP, for being on the show, and a very special thanks to Bruce Bouchard from the Paramount Theater. Bruce, it's great to have you here. It is such a wonderful resource that we have in this community with the Paramount, and if it were not for the efforts of organizations like the Paramount, we would not be able to elevate awareness. So we are very thankful. So I'm Dick Corsell, and you have been watching Community Care Network Connections. Thank you.